Well, welcome everybody to today's SEND focused webinar. I'm Pauline Holbrook and I'm head of SEND and the Special Schools Network here at SSAT. And today's focused webinar is, before we start the focused webinar, I just want to take a few minutes to put some context around this week and next week's webinars. Prior to COVID striking, Perseid School had agreed to host an Innovation and Impact Day to share with the network ideas and practices around well-being. This had been due to take place last Wednesday, but had to be postponed, as you can imagine. In conversation with the head, I suggested that perhaps the school would like to take a couple of aspects of the day and offer them as webinars, hence why we are here today. If this had gone ahead as just a normal Innovation and Impact Day, we would have had 10 or 12 delegates joining us at the school. However, I'm just looking on my screen and we now have 41 of you joining virtually. So you can see far more people are going to be learning from the practice than if we'd been able to do it on a face-to-face day. I'm therefore thinking that this could be the way forward in terms of sharing practice, and I would love to hear your views about that after the webinar. So now you know where today's webinar originated from. All that is left for me to do is to say welcome to Surita Meyer, who is leading the webinar today. Surita is an assistant head at Perseid School, and she is also a Thrive trainer. Surita has said she would like to take questions via the chat button only. So please type them in as and when they pop into your head, and myself and my colleagues who are on this call will ask the questions on your behalf. Surita will be sharing her PowerPoint during the webinar, but if you, like me, would also like to see the person presenting as well as the slides, then go to the top of the delegate list and click on the rectangle, and then you should get Surita and her PowerPoint on your screen at the same time. Hope that all makes sense. So please remember, questions only via the chat button. And on that note, thanks, Surita, and over to you.
Thank you, Pauline. Yeah, I'm very happy that I can be here today with you all to for this opportunity to share with you about how we support pupils' emotional well-being at Perseid School, using specifically the Thrive approach. And as Pauline said, I am an assistant head. Our school's based on 2 campuses. We've got our primary site and we've got a secondary site. I predominantly work at the secondary site, and I'm also a Thrive trainer and a Thrive practitioner. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to start the screen share so I can show the PowerPoint. Let's see if it goes. There we go. So that's just the front page. I thought it would be quite useful for us to just look at what mental health means, or what the proposed definition is. There isn't any one single accepted definition, especially really thinking about kind of how high a national priority mental health is at the moment, especially with the pandemic. So I'm just going to read that. So it says, a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her own community. So that is if you have kind of good mental health. So if we think about the pandemic and not being able to go to work, not maybe being furloughed, losing a job, so all of those things have a lot of impact on mental health. And of course, our children live within those environments too. We have the next slide here. We have the Office of National Statistics survey of mental health of children in Great Britain. And it's on the left-hand side there, you can see that in a primary school with 250 pupils, for example, there are 11 children that will be suffering with significant distress, just as one of those there. And on the right-hand side, a secondary school one of an average class of 30 pupils, of 15-year-olds, 6 young people may be self-harming. So those are quite staggering numbers, and they are based on mainstream schools. So if you think about learning disabilities being making increased vulnerability for mental health difficulties and also triggering mental health difficulties, I imagine that it's quite high in special schools. I also wonder how many pupils have mental health difficulties that are undiagnosed because it's hidden within their learning disabilities, but that's just a thought. Here you can see from the Mental Health Task Force that 50% of all mental health problems are established by the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. Flourishing Minds actually say that it's by the age of 18 we have 75% of mental health problems established. And this of course limits their kind of life, how they significantly reduce their life, their physical health, education, if their future is impacted by this. Here we can see some factors influencing the mental health of children. You can see there the predisposing factors, so those factors that increase vulnerability. And here we have things like, you can see here disabilities, genetics, so having a low developmental level, and loss. And of course, loss is not just the loss of a person, there's all different kinds of losses that we can experience. And then we have our precipitating factors, so those that trigger the onset of our psychological problems, and you can see those there. And there's perpetuating factors, so those factors that maintain the psychological problems. So you can see here that is their school-related factors. So with those ones, examples would be maybe moving schools frequently. It may be around being bullied or being rejected by their peers, and also the influence of the media. It's the exposure to aggression and violence in kind of movies or TV games or TV programs, which decreases tolerance for frustration tolerance levels. I also think about how much the media has been impacting, or of course with the pandemic, and how that's been impacting kind of everybody's lives. And then of course we have our protective factors, and this is where schools really come in, where we have our kind of early intervention programs and our school environments. So those are really key things that we can focus on to support our children's mental health and well-being. So things that we could do is like an intervention program, and I'm going to be talking about the Thrive approach that we use at Perseid, but also the school environment and all like the family learning programs that we may be offering. So do we have any questions so far?
No, there's no questions at the moment. Everyone's quite happy. But
okay,
just,
good.
but just on special needs, I believe it's children are 3 times as likely to have a mental health condition if they've also got a special educational need.
Wow.
So, you know, it just adds even more grist to the figures that you showed. It just shows how many of the students in our schools, the children we're teaching, will have a mental health issue. And I think you're very right. Often they get hidden or not brought to the fore because they're part of their diagnosed condition.
Okay, thank you, Lily.
Still no questions, so if you just want to go on to your next area.
Yeah, I'll do that. So, so at Perseid, we use the Thrive approach. So the Thrive approach is a specific way of working with children that help their social and their emotional well-being. And it engages them kind of with their life and learning. So you can see there on the slide that it helps us prepare them for the emotional ups and downs that life will bring them. It's quite a rigorous target and measured approach. And it really tells us how we need to be and what we need to do to support our pupils when they are really feeling those distressed kind of times in having those distressed moments. So we introduced the Thrive approach at Perseid in 2017. It's originally it was started off as a mainstream approach, but it really has developed over the years, and it's now used across all settings. Just a bit of background. It was founded in 1996, which is 24 years ago, by the 4 founder directors. They consisted out of 2 teachers who were also Ofsted inspectors, a social worker who also trained social workers later in her career, and also a family therapist who specialized in adoption and fostering. So a quite range of people from different backgrounds that contributed. It's based on these 4 kind of pillars. So it's those established kind of research in neuroscience, and it uses a really basic brain model to explain how we develop emotionally. A lot of research into attachment theory. 2 books that I can really recommend within attachment theory, and I don't know if it's showing the right way around for you, but it's Building the Bonds of Attachment by Daniel Hughes, and also Attachment in Common Sense and Doodles by Miriam Silver. It just really explains attachment in an understandable way and help us to really relate to our students. And then it also includes child development theory and the research into kind of the role of creativity and play. So those 4 areas all kind of draws into the Thrive approach. So what's involved, you can see that it's Thrive Online. So it's a subscription that a school can buy into if they have a trained Thrive practitioner. It's a very simple to use program. It does whole group profiling. So you can focus on a class, so you can do a whole class profile and see within your class what themes you can work on to help them build their emotional well-being or their resilience, or maybe there's a small group of pupils within a class or maybe in the playground, and you can profile them as a group and see where the gaps are. Then there's individual profiling or assessments. So that is where you do a more targeted approach to that specific pupil. And both the profiles, the whole group and the individual profile, would lead to a tailored action plan. So it really tells you in detail what you can do to support those children. You can progress, you can really see progress, you can monitor, review, and it shows measured outcomes as well. So it's a really key tool that we use for Thrive Online. And as I said, to be able to use Thrive Online, you would need a Thrive practitioner, a trained Thrive practitioner. So I thought it'd be helpful if I just share a little bit about the theory and the science behind the approach with you. So it's based on those strands. On the left-hand side, you can see the strands. And these strands represent key stages of emotional development. So if you look at this first one, which is the red one, so on the left-hand side, you have a strand model, and on the right-hand side is the building blocks model. And Thrive uses both these models to explain the theory. So within being, it's that you think about your 0 to 6 month old developmentally. Within doing, you're thinking about 6 to 18 months, thinking 18 months to 3 years. Power and identity would be 3 to 7, which is that key 3 to 7. Skills and structure would 7 to 11, and interdependence is the 11 plus age range. So these they come on sequentially. So you start at being, then you go to thinking, but you can come back to them. They do recycle. So maybe something happens in your life and you go back into your being needs. So we are kind of all truly lifelong learners if we look at emotional development. It all depends on our kind of life experiences. But of course, no one has a perfect model like this. Everything, there's no gaps, all sturdy and secure. We all have gaps in our development. So you can see here with the strand model, the holes, and on the right-hand side, the building block model, where you can see, for example, in that example, there's a big gap with him being here, next in that red section. And then you can imagine that's quite unstable and probably quite wobbly. So what we need to do is kind of identify what are those gaps in our pupils. And that's what the Thrive approach does for us, that online program. It identifies those gaps. So sometimes life events happen for us, and because we've had good enough experiences and our resilience is good, we're able to cope with those life events and we're okay. But sometimes those life experiences happen, but we don't have the skills or the resilience to cope, and then we kind of tumble down. So it could feel like we're falling down a hole. So I've got a little, just a demonstration for you here. So I'm just going to unshare the screen quickly. There we go. So hopefully you can see the lovely Jenga blocks here. And this part always makes me a bit panicky because I feel it's going to fall down before I've actually explained. But if you imagine this is a person, it's quite a stable, secure person, very resilient, and kind of very little gaps in here. But life experiences happen. So if we think about the pandemic, for example, it may be that actually you haven't been able to visit or stay overnight with dad for the last 12 weeks. So that's a change for you, a new experience. So that may create a gap. Sorry, it's just there. May create a gap in your well-being. It may be that you haven't been able to go to school, so it's a bit like a loss of school. So that can create another gap. Whoa, that creates another gap. It may be that actually grandpa's really sick and you're not able to visit him or see him, and that maybe creates another gap in your well-being. So as you can see, the gaps are kind of growing. So all these experiences that you may have the potential to create gaps in your emotional well-being. And if you have too many of these experiences, that creates these gaps, at some point you are going to tumble down because you don't have the resilience to cope with things happening. So with our pupils in our school, it could be even not being able to transition from one class to another. That is quite a difficult thing for them to do. So all those things have an impact on our pupils and on their emotional well-being. So what Thrive approach does is it gives us those key areas to work on, so that when we may not be able to fill the gaps with the support that we give, sometimes we will, but sometimes we won't. But what we're aiming for is for those children to have resilience. So when they do hit a gap, they have the skills to be able to cope with what is happening. So that's the aim of the whole approach. So making sure that we learn those strategies, those coping skills that we need. So if something in life happens, because we can't make life perfect, life will always happen. So when it happens, we can be resilient. I'm just going to move that out of the way. I hope it's not going to tumble. Okay, I'm just going to go back to screen sharing. Oh. Here. Okay, made it quite clear. Do we have any questions at this point?
No, I think everyone's sort of with you and taking it. I loved the representation, though, of the Jenga tower. I thought that was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Okay, so just a little bit, if we just think about today's focus and really thinking about how we use those repeated positive experiences to help a child's well-being, it's probably good to understand a bit of the theory about why that works. So here you can see a picture of a bridge over a ravine. on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, there's like these 3 circles. So if we just look at the top circle, the newborn picture there. So all of us, this is a little bit of information about the brain and theory around the brain. We all have neuronal pathways, and when we are newborns, our neurons are quite dangly. They haven't quite connected. There's a few connections. They're quite dangly. They're not as connected yet. So with our experiences, those neuronal pathways grow, and you can see there in the middle picture, there are kind of lots of neuronal pathways, quite strengthened pathways, lots of connections. So quite a lot and quite a big difference if you look between the newborn and the 3-year-old example there. So I put the picture of the bridge and the ravine in. So you, if you were standing on the one side and there was no bridge and you needed to get to the other side, getting across the very first time will be really difficult. You would need to have all your tools and be able to get to the other side somewhere with ropes and climbing things and all those things that you need. So that very first time, it will be quite tricky, but as you cross over and come back and you build your bridge, the stronger the bridge becomes. So later on, you can actually just walk over the bridge. And it's the same with our neuronal networks. We need those repeated good enough positive experiences so that we can, so that our neuronal pathways can be stronger. So if you think about electrical wire with that kind of sheath around, so the impulse goes quite quickly through the pathway. But if it's not a strong pathway, the impulse is can find it quite difficult to get through and to make those connections. So at the age of 3, synaptic pruning begins. And synaptic pruning is that where those neuronal pathways that you are not using are being pruned away. So if you don't have those experiences, the pruning starts to happen. And this kind of strengthening, which is called myelination, and the synaptic pruning kind of happens throughout our lives. You can see here in the adult picture that they're quite strong myelinated neuronal pathways, but they are a lot less than what they were in the kind of 3-year-old one. So there's that process of synaptic pruning and myelination, and that makes our brains, that gives our brains the neuroplasticity, but also what we do makes a difference, because if we have those repeated experiences, we can start to strengthen those neuronal pathways. So by making sure we offer that to our pupils, we can increase or myelinate those neuronal pathways. And it's important that it's repeated experiences, because if you only do it once, it's not going to be a myelinated pathway. Like if you build the bridge, if you just have one rope over to the other side, it's still going to be really difficult to get to the other side. So you have to really build and have those repetitions and repeat and repeat and repeat. That's really important. Okay, so here we...
Surita, before you go on, we've got one question from Tracy, who is asking, will we get the slides?
You will get part of the slides, but unfortunately not the Thrive specific slides. Okay, so here we have the triune brain model. So this is the brain model that it's a very simplistic model that Thrive uses, and it links in really clearly with the Thrive strands that are there. So we have, so our brains develop from the bottom up and from the right to the left. So I'm going to start here with the brain stem. So you can see the red part there in the picture. If you are looking at me as well, I'm using Dan Siegel's hand model to also explain it. So the very first part of our brains where those neuronal pathways start to form is here in the brain stem. So this is also called our instinctual brain or our reptilian brain. And it operates outside of our conscious awareness. So it's that part of the brain that is important and vital for our survival. So it's our breathing, our heart rate, our blood pressure, our sleep cycles, our swallowing. So all of those things are being controlled by this part of the brain, that red part, the brain stem. And it links very closely to the being strand of the Thrive model. And I don't know if you can see here, but this is where when you feel something, it's a yellow circle that I have in front of me. And so you feel something, and the blue circle is you behave. So you feel and behave, and it's kind of connected still. You feel and you immediately behave. There's no thought process or anything in between. It's a feeling and a reaction that you have. So this is in the brainstem, and it links really closely to our physiological regulation. And I'll come on to that in the next slide.
Surita, one more question has come through. A colleague saying that pupils who have developmental trauma haven't had those connections that you were talking about, so will struggle significantly more and have less resilience. And could you say give any ideas of specific strategies that might help them?
Yes, I'll come on to that towards the end of the presentation. I'll share some of the things that we do at Perseid.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, so that's the brainstem. And that links in with our physiological regulation. Then we have our limbic system. So that's the orange part. So it's like a set of clusters that sits on top of the brainstem, and this part is very important for our emotions. It's like the center of our emotions, and it enables us to recognize opportunities and to experience pleasure in relationships, so with others, with the wider world. So it's a really important part of the brain. And also our amygdala sits within this part, and of course our amygdala looks out for those perceived opportunities and threats. So it may be that we perceive a lot of threats in our environment, but that's that part of the brain where kind of our emotions lie. So we've got our brain stem, and then we have our limbic system. So that's why that's called the emotional brain. It's also called the mammalian brain because we have it in common with mammals. And then the emotional brain links into the doing strand of the Thrive approach. And within the regulation we'll be thinking about within this part of the brain is our relational regulation. So our ability to ask for help. Then the third part of the brain there is our cognitive brain. So we've got our brain stem, our limbic system, and then our cortex forms over this set of clusters. So this is where our neuronal pathways begin to become online. And our cortex is divided into two hemispheres. So we have the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. Within the right hemisphere sits creativity, play, it also links in quite closely to the limbic system, the right hemisphere, and it comes online first. So from the bottom up, from the right to the left. So that's why creativity and play are so important in our kind of emotional development. So any activities where there's creativity and play is really important within our emotional well-being. And then after that part kind of comes online, it's your the left-hand side, the left hemisphere that comes online, and that is the part of the brain where it's more your language side, your problem solving, your sequencing and sorting, all those things happen in the left-hand side. So you have to, as adults, we have to support the pupils to think about it, because what Thrive talks about is lending them your brain to help them to process and to sequence, because those skills may not have formed yet. So at Perseid we use Thrive Online, and we then see in which strands they fall, so being, doing and thinking, and then we use strategies that they suggest within those specific areas. Do you have any other questions about that, Pauline?
No, we've got no more questions, but a colleague from Richard Cloudsley's school has helpfully said that there is a video on YouTube that's called Hand Model of Brain by Dr. Daniel Siegel, which explains what you've just been doing as well. So what I've said was, at the end of this, when we put the presentation up so others can view it, alongside the slides that you can share, I will also put a link to that as well, so people can take a look at that as well if they wish.
Yes, lovely. Thank you for sharing. It's a really good video clip from Dan that's on there. Okay, so I thought next we can really look at that regulation, because that's really important. I mean, everything is important, but it's really important for us to understand regulation and understand how we can help create those experiences, so a child can learn to regulate themselves, because they have to be able, they have to experience being regulated before they can regulate themselves. So I'd like to do this activity. You'll see there in front of you a lovely photo of the Caribbean islands. And I would like you to really imagine into the following scenario. You may want to close your eyes if you want to, and you don't need to, but it's going to really build this picture into your mind. So after months of a travel ban, eventually the travel ban's lifted and you are able to fly to your holiday destination, maybe a lovely Caribbean island holiday. You're feeling very excited. School's just closed after a very exhausting and very long term. So you rush home, you have a quick shower, you grab your bags, you get in the car and you drive to the airport. Just really think in how that's feeling for you. Just imagine how that is for you. The roads are busy, the traffic's moving really slowly, and the time is ticking away. And finally you arrive. You park at the long stay car park, you wait for the shuttle bus, you eventually get to the check-in desk, and you couldn't check in last night because your internet was down, and you start to unpack your bag and you cannot find your passport. So just really think into how that is for you, what's happening inside your body. So really sense into your body what sensations you have, what do you become aware of. Maybe you have some sweaty palms, maybe your heart's pounding, maybe there's some kind of tightness in your chest, maybe there's a knot in your tummy. So really become aware of those sensations in your body. And then also then think about what emotions are you feeling. Are you feeling angry? Are you upset? Maybe you're feeling frustrated or deflated. And just then think, how do you respond? What do you do? Do you frantically search through your bag, hoping to find it there? And you search again and you search again, hoping that it's there next time? Do you throw your bag over the counter and empty the whole bag? Do you swear? Do you maybe have your eyes well up because you think it's all over, you can't go on holiday? Are you shouting? Are you blaming your partner that's standing next to you? So just think how it is for you, and then think about how you resolve the situation. What do you do to fix the problem? Do you ask someone for help? Do you get back in the car and go home and fetch it? Maybe you're so early at the airport that there's enough time to do that. Do you call someone and they bring your passport to you halfway and you meet them halfway and then drive back? So I'm hoping that scenario really kind of illustrated the different regulation that we may experience. So first of all, that physiological regulation that happens in our body. So our kind of our heart rate, our kind of sweaty palms, our tight chest, breathlessness maybe. So all of that is our physiological kind of regulation. And then our ability to ask someone for help or to kind of use another person to help us to calm down, that's relational regulation. And then cognitive regulation is our ability to think things through and find a solution. Okay, so any questions there, Pauline?
No, there's no more at the moment. Just somebody said the feeling heat.
Heat, yeah, absolutely, I get that too. Good, and then so on to our next slide then. So just a little bit more then about regulation, because I think this is a really key part in how we support our pupils' well-being, because if we have strategies to use these regulation systems, we are able to be more resilient. So within, and of course I said before that we need those, a child needs those repeated relational positive experiences of being regulated themselves before they can, we need to help them to regulate before they can regulate themselves. So as adults, we need to give these opportunities for pupils to have these experiences. Of course, as a challenge for us at the moment is how do we do this kind of in a safe way with all the COVID guidance that we have to follow. And it's really thinking through and being and kind of thinking out of the box with how we can offer the same experiences. So first of all, we have our physiological regulation. So as I said, a child needs to be physiologically regulated themselves before they can regulate, they have to have the experiences before they can regulate themselves. So here I have crocodile, just to show you the link into the brainstem or the reptilian brain. So in this area of physiological regulation, we really think about activities where we can recreate what a mom and a baby would have. So we're thinking about that 0 to 6 month developmental age. So if we look at attachments and that good enough relationships with a primary caregiver and a child, it's very much this, I hope you can see it, relationship of the child and the mom, and we're in this little bubble, and we call it the world of the face. So it's those activities, there's eye contact, maybe activities where there's rocking or singing, a rhythmic drum session or something that kind of replicates the heartbeat of the mom. So it's those kind of activities that we would do at a physiological regulation level. So really thinking about being creative, thinking about what we have for, what would it look like for a baby, and how can we age appropriately do that in our school settings. I'm just going to put the crocodile down. There we go. So it's thinking about things like breathing, maybe a rocking chair to sit on, that rhythmical movement. OT-SI programs are really important. Intensive interaction is a very good way of building physiological regulation. It creates those kind of eye contact opportunities. So I don't know if you've seen the still face experiment on YouTube, but that really shows that relationship between a mom and a baby. And if you think about how can I replicate that in a school setting, we also things like having a clear structure, having those boundaries, any kind of games where you need to make eye contact, those kind of things are really beneficial for having those physiological regulation, building those, building that. Then the next one is our relational regulation. So that's the part that links into our limbic system. And that's our emotional brain, and also sometimes it's called a mammalian brain. So I have a little monkey here just to demonstrate. So at this point we move away from this kind of world of the face, it's just mom and baby, to the kind of facing the world. So in this stage, a toddler will be beginning to crawl, they're beginning to climb onto things, explore, they explore their own bodies, they have kind of an adventure, they really move into the world. And I don't know if you know, but if kind of a lot of times a baby would kind of crawl away, stop, and then look back at mum, and mum will nod and say, yes, it's fine, you carry on. And then the baby carries on further. It's that kind of safety where the mum says, yes, it's fine. So it's that checking in and having that relational experience of saying, yes, that's okay, carry on, you're safe. That's how do we recreate that within our school settings. So it's things where we can invite them into, infuse them into kind of exploration, how we encourage a child, creating those safe exploration opportunities. Nature is a really good way of enticing people, and it's also very beneficial for our well-being. It's about the adult playing alongside, being that adventurer with the child. And also maybe things like turn-taking games or the curiosity program. All those kind of things are really beneficial within this strand. Then for the cognitive regulation, so like I said, it's that where our thinking brain starts forming. So I've got a little doll here. So at this point, the children are not able to kind of sequence and think themselves yet. They need a lot of experiences of those type of activities with an adult before they could do it themselves. So it may be thinking, the Thrive approach uses a specific strategy called captain thinking, which is a really good strategy to use. But of course, you'll know more about that if you go on the training for practitioner training. But other things that you could do is like sequencing, sorting, maybe playing kind of what is happening next games, making up stories, board games, all those kind of exciting things that they might want to do. But it's about us being able to explain to them and talk them through kind of labeling their emotions and labeling what they're doing within that strand. So that is the cognitive regulation. And when we think about our kind of potentially in some schools, how sometimes you jump into the cognitive regulation first, but actually a child needs some support into physiological regulation. A child isn't, even if they're a verbal child, they're not necessarily able to say what happened and why it happened. It's about maybe there was something in physiological regulation that they needed support with first. And when they are calm and regulated, maybe they can talk through what happened with an approach where we notice and we wonder and we really kind of label their thinking for them as much as we can. Okay, any questions?
Yes, there is actually. It fits in with your last point really about children who may have limited language and difficulty expressing their emotions. Mm-hmm. The question is really around, can Thrive training and the services be offered to others within your school, not just perhaps your teachers and teaching assistants, but the speech and language therapist is one of the people that they're suggesting. So have you trained everybody in your school and everybody who comes, or just the teaching assistants?
There's a lot of training opportunities, and at the end of the presentation I'll share the Thrive websites where you can find information about courses and so on. But they're all different kind of levels of courses. And as a school, what we've done is I trained as a practitioner and implemented the approach. And then we had an induction from a Thrive trainer that came into school, and that was delivered to kind of all the staff, speech and language therapy as well. If they, it was open to people who would like to come. We had an educational psychologist also attend that induction training, and then from that we've we've noticed, of course, the benefit of Thrive. So we've just trained 2 more practitioners within our school. There's quite a variety of things that you can do in different levels that you can do. But I think the important part really is that to be able to run Thrive in a school, you do need a Thrive practitioner. So I hope that answers the question.
It did, and actually it was my misinterpretation of it, because they put SLTs and I'd assumed it meant speech language therapist, but they actually meant senior leadership team.
Yeah, there's yeah, you can, but there's also a senior leadership specific course that can be delivered to by Thrive to senior leaders, and they're doing them virtually at the moment. And they're quite good, and I can't remember exactly how many afternoons it is, but it's spread out, so it's not too time impactful at the moment when we're quite busy with other things, but it's definitely worth looking into that. Yeah.
Thank you. That's all the questions at the moment, so that's really helpful that there's something specific for the senior leadership team. Thank you.
Okay, and I just hope, because I try to share what we do at Perseid within those. A lot of our pupils are more at the physiological and the relational regulation. So I had more examples within those that I shared because of the developmental levels of our pupils. And so hopefully I've answered that question about the activities. Okay. So I'll move on to, I'm nearly finished with the presentation, but I thought it's just useful to quickly just share a bit of a case study, just tell you about a student that we had. So it's a young man, he's 16 years old. He has autism and profound learning difficulties. So he was very, very withdrawn into himself. He appeared to want his own space. He would always take himself away from everybody else, always away from other people. He didn't like to make eye contact, a lot of unhappy vocal sounds, and his demeanor in general just seemed unhappy. He also wasn't making any kind of progress towards his academic targets. So we decided to do an individual Thrive action plan for him. And he's been on it for a while now, as you can see there on the screen. That was February 2019 and June 2019. I just thought I'll share this one with you. But we assessed him at the being needs, so that the being strand, the first strand, and each strand have 3 key developmental needs. So within the being strand, we've got being safe, being special, and having our needs met. And we implemented quite a lot of strategies for him, very much about relationship and how we can make him feel safe and special. So those 3 things that you can see here, the blue, the being safe, the being special, the having needs met, we really had a focus on all of that for his curriculum and his days. And intensive interaction is another thing that we used with him kind of all the time, that kind of eye contact, making sure that we are there in relation with him. And you can see the progress there, especially in that kind of being safe. Although it's quite small, in his demeanor, it came across as a different person. Even the tiniest bit of progress is shown up with the Thrive models and the Thrive reviews. But with him, when we did that reevaluation, he had a lot of repeated experiences of being safe, made a lot of fuss about him, showing delight in him, meeting his needs without kind of moaning about it, because that sometimes happens in schools, I think. And then how we created a safe space for him. So we really looked into what we could do to meet those being needs for him. And also, like I said, a big focus was about the relationship with key staff members. And now he's showing much more confidence within his interaction. He really is kind of seeking people out, trying to make eye contact, really look into your eyes to see what you do with your face. So really those key things that are so important. And we realized that...
Was I one?
Sorry, Pauline.
Oh, it wasn't me speaking. I don't know.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So then, so it's those key, those interactions became much more confident from him, and he was really seeking us out. And what we realized is that our
God, I hear me if I unmuted it.
where originally our view was that he likes to be on his own and he likes his own space. Actually, he liked being with people, and he just didn't know how to do that. And and he doesn't necessarily want his own space. Like I said, he likes to be with people. We have an intensive interaction consultant that comes in once a year, and 1 year he did some work with him, and the following year when he came back, he made a comment. He saw him in the corridor, and he made a comment about how he's a different young man to a year ago. And I think that's really validated what the work that we've done. So I just thought I'll share that with you as a really positive example of one of our pupils in our school that really shift in well-being, from being unhappy all the time to actually want to engage, to come over to you, to take your hand. So that was significant for him. Okay, so I think I'm just going to leave you with this quote. It says, "I'm afraid," said Rabbit. "What are you afraid of?" asked Bear. "I don't know," replied Rabbit. "I just am." "Then I will sit with you until you're not afraid anymore," said Bear, "and we will face it together." So I think really it captures that that kind of relationship, and yeah. So yeah. And that's it. And there's the Thrive information for people who are interested to learn more about it. You can also, so you can contact them, but you can also contact me at Perseid.
Lisa,
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Surita. That was really, really useful, going through all of the background as well and giving some true examples towards the end of exactly what you've done. So thank you very much for your time and all the work that went into preparing the presentation. As I said right at the beginning, you know, if we'd done this actually face-to-face in your school, we probably would have had 10 or 12 people there. However, we had over 60 on the webinar during today's session. So well done, thank you for that. And we reached so many more people. And we're getting some lovely messages through saying thank you to you and loving the quote and all the things at the end. So really, really appreciated by colleagues who are on the webinar at this moment in time, as you can see us from the chat room. We'll make sure everything goes up, and we will send links out to everybody so that they can access it again if they want to, and share it with other colleagues within their school. And as I said right at the beginning, Perseid are going to do another one next week, and that's going to be led by Kim, who is one of Surita's colleagues and the educational psychologist who works with the school, and they're going to be looking at solution circles. So again, I think next week a very, very practical session, and hope that you can all find an hour to just put aside and join us for next week's presentation. But thank you so much, Surita. That was a fabulous presentation. And as I say, they're just coming through and through all the thank you and everything. So really well and truly, and they loved the props, and so did I. It just made it so much more interesting. So thank you very, very much, and look forward to hopefully at some point coming down to Perseid once we all can. But thank you for today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and hope to see you next week. So thanks everybody. Bye.
Thank you.